Hello my dear friends, my name is Seidr and today I'm going to talk about spinning and weaving and its use in Seidr. The previous video was about Seidr and I kept telling you spinning and weaving was an important art within the magical practice of Seidr. I didn't explain that particular subject because I wanted to make a video just for it, which is this one. But before that, let me just remind you that I don't think Seidr should be labeled witchcraft, because the term itself lacks a deeper understanding of what it actually means. Witchcraft is a widespread term which means nothing and means everything. Everything that can't be explained and seems magical in nature goes into the bag of witchcraft, even if it isn't witchcraft at all. So labeling Seidr as witchcraft, it's forcing people to accept it as a term and not actually feel the need to understand it. Let me give you an example. We archaeologists do like to label things as ritual, religious, spiritual, when we don't have an immediate understanding of what things are. I remember being on a dig site, prehistoric context, and it was found a cylindrical shaped object, small size, made of bone, with a weird shape, almost anthropomorphic. And immediately it was labeled as a ritual object of devotion. It was a prehistoric ear piercing, a type of jewelry. So when we give to something a widespread term which means absolutely nothing in particular, but at the same time means every possible thing in existence, even what we don't know about, we are not giving the proper value to the thing itself, making people settle with an empty understanding. And so we do not really know the purpose of things nor how to use them. Well, let's start this video. To understand this concept of spinning and weaving in Seidr, first we must turn to the idea that each one of us is born with a life thread, metaphorically speaking. In Norse tradition, this is called the urlog. Urlog is an Old Norse word meaning primal law. The things that came before us that are stable, constant and can't be moved or changed. The events that have been spun and can't be unspun. But unlike fate, it can be altered, but it's not easy to change. We can change our attitudes and emotional responses, and we can choose to spin our life's tapestry differently. Think about urlog as a strand, a string. Each one of us has one. It's our own life, but it's not alone. There are others around us who came before us or are here right now. These threads weave together to create the tapestry of the community. It goes back to our deepest ancestors, which in Norse tradition are the gods themselves. These connections create the web of weird, the web of fate. In many pagan cultures, and obviously in the Norse culture, the spiritual existence is divided in parts. Our own body is part of our spiritual existence. Part of the spirit is inherited. It has been passed down through our ancestors. Other forces around us which influence directly are part of the spirit and thus are part of us. Our own individuality is another part of the spirit, etc. Within our own life thread, we have many threads, many strings which will also connect us to other strings, from people, animals, the world itself. So all these threads have had influence from past and present events, memories and emotions, and one day will influence future lives. But the concept of fate, which is created by the urlog, by different strings, isn't something completely fixed, unaltered. I think it's important to say this because when speaking about the Norse goddesses of fate, there is this shallow idea that they weave the fate and everything is fixed, and that shallow understanding completely denies the complexity of the concept of fate in Old Norse societies. The Norns weave the first layer, the things that no matter what, you cannot change. Because whether you like it or not, there was history even before you were born. You yourself are made of the stuff of the ancestors. You are the direct part of the spiritual existence of your parents. So you are attached to loads of things that can't be changed. The primal law I have spoken of, the first layer, the primal layer. But when you exist, your own individuality will create and spin and weave new events, new emotions, a new history. You are your own Norn. With this explanation, and no worries, I will probably make a video about the concept of fate in Old Norse societies. But for now, I gave you this simple understanding about fate so you can start to understand the importance of spinning and weaving in Seidr. Because it's about directly using Seidr as a form of altering events by reweaving the strings, touching the tapestry of fate. In a more scientific understanding, it's like touching your own DNA. Seidr, as I've said, can't be labeled as witchcraft, nor can it be understood as just being in trance through shamanic techniques. Seidr is a mixture of magical arts, of chanting and invoking, traditional sciences and shamanism. Seidr in itself was about spinning the mind and send it forth to attract or do things. As you might have noticed, being an archaeologist, I do prefer to explain things using scientific sources, but Seidr goes beyond that, so I'll try to explain as much as I can with something more emotional, something more humane, so you can understand by comparing it with your own emotions. Seidr is about attracting things, desired objects, persons, and resources. In many literary sources, especially Icelandic ones, it is as if the victims are pulled by an invisible rope. This rope is the will of the practitioner of Seidr, sending forth its mind, which doesn't necessarily have to be an ecstatic activity. The practitioner of Seidr can send its mind in the shape of an animal or any other shape, which leads us to the sources, which include either shape-shifting in Seidr activities or the use of Folklore, helping spiritual entities most often in the form of animals. The word Gandr might also give us a better understanding of this spinning in Seidr. Gandr is also the designation of giving shape to the mind that the Seidr performer could send forth. Gandr, Gand, Gondul, and Gondul are words connected to chords, strings, spinning, twisting. Gandr is always closely connected to the art of Seidr, because the performer of Seidr could send forth a mind emissary through spinning, through bending the wheel and focusing it into the desire of creating a shape of its own consciousness, and send it forth. As I've said, the Norse concept of the soul divides it into many parts, and this was sending part of the soul, part of the spirit. After all, the Folklore themselves, the spiritual entities, are also part of our spiritual existence. In Norway, a magical projectile is often called Gand, and it comes in a whirlwind, the spinning of wind. The whirlwind spins resemble a rope or thread, and it was used to attract something, a desired object, and if a knife was thrown into the whirlwind, the sorcerer who created it was killed or injured. It's no coincidence Tolkien's character Gandalf is a wizard, and his name is the Norse word for elven staff or wand. This wand or staff was used by the Vulva, a practitioner of Seidr. The Vulva used the ritual distaff in hand to enter in an altered state of consciousness, to travel in spirit through the 9 worlds. The distaff is a tool used in weaving, and probably this spinning activity helped entering in a trance-like state, like dancing wildly in circles, the constant tiring rhythm. But this is when I also have to make a boundary here, because when we speak about shamanism, the consciousness is of relatively less importance, because if you are conscious, you cannot have out-of-the-body experiences. You have to be unconscious, trick your brain that you are unconscious, so it can let you out. This is why I don't like to label Seidr as just trance work, because as I've been telling you, this activity to send forth the mind, send forth part of the spiritual self, You have to be conscious, otherwise you cannot send your own mind. In Seidr, different techniques were required for different purposes. If your purpose is to have a spiritual journey, travel in spirit, then you require a trance state. And you are not conscious. Your brain thinks you are unconscious and it lets you out. You are still attached to your body and your brain works, but he has the impression that you are unconscious, so it will let you wander about. But in Seidr, when sending a mind emissary to attract things, you have to be conscious because you are sending your mind, a part of your spiritual self and not the entire spiritual self. A bit complex, I know, but you have to understand that Seidr isn't just about being in trance. In truth, most of the time it requires great concentration and be very much conscious of what you are doing. Let me give you an example of this mind emissary, because it comes in the sources both historical, mythological and folklore. I've talked about this before, a small magic creature that sucked milk from other people's cows and brought it home to its owner. In Norway it was known as småkatt and in Sweden was Bjära. I talked about this before, if I'm not mistaken, in the video about cats and witches in a Norse perspective, because this magic creature came in the form of a cat, most of the times. Well, in Iceland it was known as telveri or snekkur. This creature looked like a ball of yarn, and in Finland it was partly made of spindle or spindles with yarn on them. These shapes are all variations of linking yarn to something, the use of tools and resources for the work of weaving. If this creature was injured or killed, so was the person who created it. Much like the concept of magical projectile in the form of a whirlwind I told you before. Thus, this is an example of the mind emissary, the practitioner of Seidr conceived by spinning a thread. Obviously, it seems very strange, this entire concept of sending the mind in the form of a ball of yarn or a thread. This explanation may very well be just metaphorically. What is implicit in here, the thread or the ball of yarn, is that the practitioner of Seidr could send forth its mind by spinning its own will, by focusing its will, concentrating it into some kind of force, a spinning force like the wind, and send it forth, send that force. The Migin, for instance, which is spiritual force, spiritual essence residing in us, but also in objects we create and come in contact with. And this is also part of the spiritual self. Maybe that's it, spinning this force and giving it shape and send it, metaphorically making a comparison with the work of spinning and weaving. Magic wind could be conceived as a sorcerer's mind sent forth, like the whirlwind case. For instance, in Old Norse magical and spiritual concepts, one's breath is one's mind, spirit or soul, hund. Old Norse hund, which is spirit, and handa, which is to breathe. There is a close relationship with these words. A good example of this is a Sami legend about a sorceress whose husband is a merchant and he's far down in Norway. The sorceress goes into the top of a mountain with her distaff in hand, the tool which the spinner attaches the spinning materials, and she sings, she lets out her breath in ritualistic chanting and sends forth the winds to her husband so he can arrive home faster. Apparently, the sorceress spins the wind and pulls her husband back to her. The entire concept of spinning and weaving, pulling the strings, is implicit in this legend. In many accounts across Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Lapland, magical winds are created by something spinning. Another example I would like to share with you, one in Sweden. There is an account of a woman who has cords with which she can draw away fish in the sea and take milk from cattle. The cords have knots, and in each cord there are evil spirits. And if the woman unites the knots, she can send the spirits to wherever she wants. She sends them to gather butter and calves from other farms. This is a 16th century tale, but the concept of using a cord, working with spirits, sending them to do something, is still implicit in this tale. Even taking milk and cattle from others, just like the magic creature made from threads and balls of yarn. Of course, with the passage of time, the tales change, get all mixed, and the ideas disperse, and the meaning is lost along the way. Quoting Tolkien, history became legend, and legend became myth. The truth was once much clearer, but seen by the eyes of outside people who do not practice such traditions, inventions are created. Mystical explanations, labeling things as witchcraft, and the entire meaning is lost. All these tales seem very silly, but behind them lies the truth. The myth is the distorted truth, which changed through the ages, like the game of the broken phone. You say a phrase and it arrives at the end completely distorted. Seidr was about spinning and weaving. Spinning the mind, bending the will, focusing on one purpose, be aware of the parts of the spirit, using chanting techniques, invocations, altering events by forcing our own will upon life itself and the life of others. This type of magical work, much like any other type of profound wisdom, wasn't easily acquired, and those who had it didn't give it away so willingly, freely, easily. To achieve such a state of wisdom, it cannot be easy. People have to earn it, work for it, otherwise they won't get it. If it's given to you, you won't know how to use it, unless you have learned by working with it, by learning the hard way. This is why wisdom most of the time comes in metaphors, myths, comes in codes. That's what mythology is, cultural codes with hidden knowledge. If you read it as fantasy, you will never understand it as something more than just that, just tales. But if you see what's behind these codes, the truth in the skies, then you will acquire the wisdom our ancestors hid from you, which is in plain sight in the tales, but not that easy to get unless you work your mind to achieve it. As I've told you before, Seidr was women's magic. I've talked about the vulva and their use of a ritualistic tool, a distaff, the tool used on spinning work. So naturally, symbolic or cultic distaffs are found in women's graves, mostly of the Viking Age. So in those cases, we may be before practitioners of Seidr. However, people were also buried with their tools, representing their functions in life, their social status, and to take such objects with them to continue their work in the afterlife. But there are some cases of these staffs made of metal, and these may be the ones that indicate an actual practitioner of Seidr. These may be the real Seidr staffs. For instance, in Eric's saga, the staff of the sorceress was made of metal. This could be an account to differentiate these staffs for the actual weaving work from the ones for magical uses. Such distaffs are found almost exclusively in women's graves, and they are very elaborate, too beautiful to be used in the constant household industry. In the early Middle Ages, not much in Scandinavia, but on the continental area of Europe, working with wool or any other kind of textile work, but especially weaving, was believed to be a way of exercising supernatural powers. Maybe because of the mind concentration required, which at a certain point the movements become almost mechanical and the mind drifts somewhere else. Just another reminder to reinforce this link between textile work and the art of Seidr. Now, I would like to finish this video with something I don't feel very comfortable with, and a lot of people tend to leave this one behind. The use of sexual activities in magical practices. I'm well aware nowadays there are men practicing Seidr, and even in the old Norse societies there were men doing it. And I'm not saying everyone had sexual activities within Seidr, but there is a great chance that in most cases, for women, sexual practices were used in the art of Seidr. I'm not speaking about sexual intercourse. I am speaking about the sexualization of rituals, something more sexual in nature and behavior. Let me explain. Seidr, as you all know, was seen as something unmanly, effeminate, and men who did it had a bad reputation within the Norse society and were labeled as urgi. It was an insult, calling them unmanly. Obviously, the work of spinning and weaving was associated with women, along with other activities men weren't supposed to do. So by doing it, they were labeled effeminate. But I think there was another reason why men weren't supposed to do it, and it was shameful. Because the main reason why men couldn't do it was because it was shameful, indecent. I mean, was it really that bad, a man doing a woman's work, that indecent? Or was something else we don't know, precisely because it was so shameful for men that it was wiped out from the sources intentionally? Because, let's face it, the sources were written by man. As I said, the practitioner of Seidr could send forth a mind emissary and could be called Gandr. The Old Norse word gondul, which derives from Gandr, could mean penis. In Icelandic pornography, Gandur is a common word for penis. In modern Icelandic, Gandul not only means coarse yarn but also penis. So it is quite possible that this thread, string, rope element in Seidr, this mind emissary, has a sexual symbolism. The term used for this mind emissary can either be a rope, thread, or penis. I mean, Gandr is not the name for the male part, it's a name given to it. Like nowadays we say cock for penis. It's an animal, but also the word for penis. Or one-eyed snake, nothing in that word is the proper name for penis, but it's a name given to the male part because of the shape. In here, Gandr might be just that, the shape of the rope resembles a penis. Better still, the shape of the distaff used in Seidr rituals resembles a penis. It was okay for women to use Seidr and not for men, because men weren't supposed to be touching male body parts. Homosexuality in Old Norse societies was allowed. It wasn't a crime or a sin, but it had restrictions. I'll talk about that on another video. But maybe with the introduction of Christianity, things changed and the art of Seidr was probably highly condemned, not only because it was labeled witchcraft, but in the Bible it's quite specific that no man shall lay down with other men, let alone touch a penis. It's quite possible that in Seidr included doing sexual or symbolic sexual acts with the distaff. A common way of holding the distaff is suggestive, between the legs. Compare that with the sexual connotations of witches holding their brooms, between their legs when riding them. There may have been sexual symbolism implicit in Seidr, something quite normal for women to do in Norse society, but not for men. This might have been the actual reason why men were seen unmanly. It was dishonorable, a great shame if they practiced Seidr. They weren't supposed to be riding anything but horses. Laugh all you want, but it's very plausible. Alright, my dear friends, I know this was a complex subject. I have given you so much information and concepts, your mind is probably spinning right now, and you are almost in a trance-like state. Well, rest for a while until my next video. I hope you have enjoyed this one, and as always, tack för idag!